started, and I'll call to order the FinCom meeting for Tuesday, May 26, 2020. The first order of business is to discuss the meeting notes from 5/11. Does everybody have those in front of them?
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second, Julie.
Kathy, I just need you to say that you're.
Sorry, that was Kathy. Motion to approve.
Thanks.
And Julie, second.
Thank you. And we'll do the roll call. Start with Eric,
Aye.
Julie,
Aye.
Kathy,
Aye.
Nate. Oh, Nate's muted. Hold on. Nate,
Aye.
Leah.
No, 7.
I wasn't here for the last meeting, so I have to abstain.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Where are you, Leah? India?
Italy, yep. It's either that or looking at my messy bedroom, so
Yeah.
Italy it is.
I just looked real quick. I'm like, that's nice.
All
It's
right.
downtown Bridgewater.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what it looks like now. If you haven't been out in a while, that's what Bridgewater looks like.
The next order of business is FY 20055, which is the transfer order of capital appropriations. We discussed this in some detail the last time around. I think Tony has sent some additional information in the breakdown, appears to be here. So I'll open it up for questions for Tony or anybody else that has anything on the capital appropriations.
And really, clarification, Michael's here to speak on some of the detailed questions that you had asked last time, specifically to the memorial building.
Yeah, I guess this is Kathy. So I would like to understand what the 701,000 that was already approved and the money's already there was set to do. And then the new appropriation, I guess, what detail do we have like around the plans and how far along in the process are we? Are those estimated monies? Why do we think that this is, money that we should be spending, given the economic climate that we're in right now?
So that's an excellent question. The the Memorial Building rehab started essentially almost 7 years ago when the voters went and voted money to debt exclude money for the Academy building, the fire station roof, the Memorial Building renovation, and also the old high school roof. So those 4 projects were sort of included in one debt exclusion ballot question. At that point, we knew that we were going to do these things in a progression. The fire station roof was the first one, and then I think the old high school roof was the second one, then the Academy building, and then the final project would be the rehab of the Memorial Building. So we've been holding this money for a long time. We have engaged the architect. We hired an architect for all of the non-school related projects, and the architect there wasn't a whole lot of architecture to do on the fire station roof, but obviously the Academy building and now the Memorial Building. So the cost estimates are based, and well, let me back up. So you're correct. There's a little over, actually there's now a little under 700,000 set aside in bond funds. We have to use that. We've been putting the auditors at bay and the DOR at bay for some time. So we have to get that used. So we looked at the Memorial Building. It needs a lot of work. I mean, it looks like it's in pretty good shape, and it is not in bad shape, but it needs a lot of drainage work. It needs a lot of accessibility work, and it's needs to be done correctly. So I guess that's how I would put it. So based on the preliminary plan for the Memorial Building, and really it's the plan, which I think you've seen before, but includes making the front entrance accessible, the rear entrance, the below grade accessible, and then rehabs the windows, which need fixing, rehabs the lower level, which needs fixing. It makes both levels, gives both levels bathrooms, which is required under the code. And that cost estimate has come to 1.7 million, which is much higher than we had anticipated certainly 7 years ago. But that's is what it is at this point. So we, similar to the Academy building, we're basing the construction estimate, the project estimate on the preliminary design plans, which are very preliminary. The cost estimate comes from a PM&C, which is a professional cost estimator out of Hingham, I believe. And so given the amount of money that it's going to take, so we need to supplement the 700 to do the job right. And so we're calculating about 500,000 out of the combined water sewer enterprise funds, and then 550 out of the community preservation as a historic project. So the original project back in 2013 proposed to use CPC funds for just the Academy building, and it was voted that way. And the CPC did offset the total indebtedness on the Academy building, and they do so each year. But they did not, at the time, did not vote any money into the Memorial building. So Memorial building is obviously one of our most historic structures in town. It has, you know, a tremendous amount of meaning, I think, historically, and certainly to the veterans in town. So this will do the project. It'll do it correctly. We designed it with an eye towards the future. We do not want to put an elevator in. We don't want to put an enhanced stair lift in because the ongoing expense of that, I would much rather use towards maintenance of the building rather than it's about $4,000 a year to license an elevator in a municipal building. So that's money that I'd rather plow back into, you know, the expenses associated with maintenance on it. So we'll probably be paying, well, actually arguably, but a little more upfront on the capital, but the long-term savings without having to install a chairlift or an elevator is substantial. So that's sort of the basic story on the Memorial building, but happy
So if we didn't approve the extra money, what would we get for 700-ish thousand that was already approved by the town?
Really, not much. I mean, unfortunately, with we have to fix the drainage, and I think you'd have to do the accessibility if it's going to remain a municipal building on the lower level and the upper level. I think you're going to have to redo the bathrooms on the lower level. Those are not accessible, and then you'd have to do the bathrooms on the upper level. And I think even at that point, you're far beyond the 700. So it's a case where, you know, either we do the project and do it right, or we don't and just return the 700. And my preference, I mean, I do get it. It's a terrible time to be appropriating funds. But the flip side is, you know, the funds that we have in hand, we're not increasing any taxpayer related funds here. The funds we have in hand, when we intend to go out to bid, which would probably be at this point in the fall, it's very likely that we're going to see a substantial, if not a complete leveling off, a substantial decrease in the construction costs just due to slowdowns everywhere else. So my hope, after not intentionally waiting 7 years, but my hope is that we can actually go out to bid on this project and do it for substantially less than the 1.7 that the estimators have identified.
So people that I've talked to around town are concerned about the water sewer increases. And why do we have to move the water and sewer department into that building? They're already in a building. If we do move them, what happens to the building that we currently have? Could we do something different that would cost less than to put them there? 500,000 is a lot of money for 6 people to move over to that building.
Well, keep in mind, I mean, we're not doing it for water and sewer specifically. We're doing it because it's a historic building and it needs to be, if we're going to do it, it needs to be done right. I do appreciate, the notion that, we've got a limited number of water sewer employees right now that need housing, but right now they're in the recreation building. The rec building was designed to house, obviously, the rec offices, the rec summer program offices. And so it's not, if you go in there, you realize very quickly it's not, there's not enough space in that building. And certainly now there's clearly not enough space to put that number of people in. Our anticipated use, and again, the use is something different than actually doing the project. So, but the anticipated use is to house a DPW department, which would include DPW director, facilities, water and sewer superintendent, town engineer, and then support staff of probably 3. So you've got a fair number of people. It's actually ironically the right square footage for the number of people that we're anticipating putting in there. Now I can tell you that we're not going to be looking. One of the things we've done is cut the budget, cut some of the open positions out of the budget. We had anticipated and hoped to go out for a DPW director in FY21, and that's one of the things that we've put the brakes on temporarily, I hope, and I anticipate, but we put the brakes temporarily there just so that we can get through FY21 budget-wise, and hopefully see a turnaround during the fiscal year.
So I just have one more question related to this piece of it. So can we pull this one line item out of this order, or do we have to vote the whole order together?
If you wanted to pull that out, I will say that we have to get an appropriation. If we're going to do it, we have to get the appropriation by the end of June. Otherwise, we'll be returning the 700. So I mean, you absolutely could. Yeah, you could pull that right out.
Michael, and I'm just, because I get where Kathy's coming from, but, I can also remember, when we sold, and I forget the school, but it's still sitting there and we sold it for $1 and the town was very upset that we let it fall into such disrepair, right? But I also remember we used to have our meetings in this building and it was in pretty bad shape 4 or 5 years ago before we rebuilt town hall. So, if we don't do something, does this become an asset that is worthless to the town in the future?
Good question. I mean, from my perspective, we have to do something with the building in order to make it accessible and effectively. Right now we've temporarily using it for files, and quite honestly, that would, that's about the only use that we would have for it at this point. If we just, maintained the status quo and kept folks down in the shed on Cottage Street.
Hey, this is Nathan. Michael, just a quick question. Looking forward, what is the plan for the town hall? We extend, if CPC funds are expended, would we use them all on the memorial building? Would there be other funds that could be used in the future for the town hall, or?
The short answer is yes. We have the town hall, not to be confused with the Academy building or the Memorial building. The town hall is right now the subject of a feasibility study being done by a cultural and arts firm that specializes in community use of buildings. We will see, right now they're doing a fair amount of community outreach, trying to solicit opinions around town about the future use of the town hall. I've had a number of discussions with BSU about creating some kind of performance or cultural space in that building, and how the programming could or might work in the future. But the first step really is to do the feasibility study. That we wrote a grant which was accepted by the Mass Cultural Council 6 or 8 months ago, and that is what partially was funding the feasibility study currently. Once the feasibility study is done, we have the ability to go back now to the Mass Cultural Council and seek capital funds for an upgrade to that building. But that certainly doesn't preclude the use of CPC funds. So right now, the CPC fund balances, let's see, Lori or Tony can correct me if I'm wrong. It looks like it's just shy of $4 million.
Sounds good.
So Nate, I don't know if that answered your question or not.
Yeah, is that the overall amount that's available? Because I know that they can be put into, there's 3 different buckets for the CPC, right?
Correct.
That's the overall, Nate.
That's the overall. Okay, thank you.
I just think it's a really hard time to be asking people to have more to have more water sewer, additional things to be added to. They already have a huge water project, a huge sewer project that's going to increase rates, and here's another thing. And I think that people are concerned about that.
I think we can do one of two things. I think we could, I know that Kathy has recommended maybe making a motion to approve with removing the memorial building funding. Personally, I think I would vote for it, knowing that when we don't do things, we do fall into disrepair and we won't be able to do it in the future. And having the 700,000 already appropriated for it, it gives us the money to do the project. But I think we can go one of two ways on it. Either we can approve it fully, and there'll probably be some dissenting opinions, or we can make a motion to approve it without the memorial building funds.
I say we just vote on it fully.
Do you want to make a motion?
Yep, motion to approve the transfer order for capital appropriations, order FY 20055.
Do I have a second? That's Leah, by the way, Josh.
Sorry.
Nathan, I'll second.
Josh, you want to do a roll call?
Yep. I'm just taking a look at the page here in a second. All right. We'll start with you, Eric. Sorry, I didn't hear you.
Aye. Aye.
Nathan?
Aye.
Kathy?
Nay.
Julie?
Nay.
Leah?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Bob Reese tried to get into this meeting. I don't know if he's having difficulties with the link, Josh, but I got a text asking me if I was in. I don't know if there's a way to reach out to him.
Yeah, I can give him a quick call.
Okay.
Okay, the next order of business is FY 20056, a fixed town clerk salary. Knowing I saw Mr. Gallagher join and we got about 5 minutes. Tony, do you want to just walk us through that?
Well, I'll just say that we, as a rule, put in an increase in the operating budget, although it requires councils, and Michael, Mr. Dutton can speak to it better than I can. That individual reports to town council, and therefore they're required to put forth an order fixing the salary. The appropriation, however, is also in the operating budget. So, and that's the town manager's operating budget. I don't know if that helps clarify it a little bit.
Yeah, no, it does. And if I'm reading it right, and I think Dennis actually sponsored this, right? I'm looking for a 2% COLA, if I'm reading this right. It's consistent with the standard 2% COLA adjusted and forwarded to the other town staff. So it's essentially what we're giving the rest of the town employees. Is that a correct statement?
Yes, however, I will add that this percentage amount was put in by the town clerk. So if this deviates from what the unions are getting, either plus or minus, there should be an adjustment. So I would refer to the town manager. If the 2% is about right for all town employees, that's what she's pretty much asking for. So if it's 1.5%, then we'll reduce it to 0.5%. If it's 2.5%, then it should go up 0.5%. But that's really the gauge we're following.
So Eric, I'll pick up on Dennis's point there. So I think it's just to be very clear, with a salaried elected official, that's the town council sets that. So as Tony mentioned, we make sure that we try to account for something in the operating budget, but that's the council's one of the council's roles is to set the town clerk's salary. So that's what Dennis has done. We're right, averaging about 2%. So it's right about there for FY21. So as Tony mentioned, he's already included that in the general operating budget. But certainly, the Dennis and the council need to vote that salary.
That's right. Are there any questions about this order in front of us? Does anybody want to make a motion?
Kathy, I'll make a motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Motion to second, Leah Wyatt.
Do the roll call vote. Eric?
Aye.
Nathan?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
Kathy?
Aye.
Leah?
Aye.
Thank you.
Great. So I think those are the two orders of new business. I think the rest of the agenda was tied to the joint meeting. Am I?
Budget.
I have the agenda.
Eric, the only thing that was added was from Susie. I think she had some questions regarding the school, but I don't think she's here. So she hasn't joined or anything. But that was the only other item that I had on the agenda.
Okay. Well, we'll keep it on the agenda, and when Susie's here, we'll discuss it more, and maybe some of the questions will be answered in the conversations regarding the budget. So Dennis, I don't know if I can only see a couple heads, so I don't know if
I see that Sean and Tim are on, so I'll call the meeting of the Budget and Finance Committee to order. Hello, Sean. Hello, Tim.
Hello. Good evening.
So we just have a couple of quick things to do, and then the main the main purpose tonight is to get a presentation on the budget. So I call the meeting to order at 7 o'clock. I'll entertain a motion to approve our minutes from May 12th.
So moved.
Second.
And motioned in second. Any discussion? Seeing none, that requires a roll call vote. Councilor Fitzgibbons,
Yes.
Councilor George,
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher, yes, 3-0. And we want to postpone the special revenue fund. Oh, you want to order FY 19057.
Motion to postpone to the next meeting.
Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote. Councilor Fitzgibbons,
Yes.
Councilor George,
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher, yes, 3-0. And then the last item is the annual fixing of the town clerk's salary, which is a 2% increase over what the town clerk currently gets. And that's pretty much an average of what is afforded and built into the budget for other town employees. So I'd entertain a motion to approve the town clerk's salary for an increase of 2%.
So
So
moved.
moved. Second.
Motion by Sean, Councilor George, seconded by Councilor Fitzgibbons.
Can I just ask either Mr. Dutton or Mr. Solmonte, non-union employees, I know there are very few of them. What's the percentage increase they're going to be getting as a cost of living, not a step or anything like that, for FY '21 on average?
I think Tony built in 2%, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, thank you. I'm good.
Okay, roll call vote. Councilor George,
Yes.
Councilor Fitzgibbons,
Yes.
Councilor Gallagher, yes, 3-0. Okay, that ends our business. Now we'll go into budget discussions. We all got another email today of the budget order. So I guess we'll start with any revisions in the revenue from a couple weeks ago. Should we spend the money first and then hear how much we have, or how should?
I think Tony just had a stroke.
I think Michael and I both realize that the best thing we can do is put a foot forward and know that we need to pivot and change with what happens in the marketplace and what happens in the economy. It was clear to us in the last meeting that, we're going to put forward a budget that maintains the current staffing levels and layoffs don't occur. And that's what the rainy day fund was for. And so that sources and uses that was provided with the submittal by the town manager hasn't changed. We look at it weekly. So there's nothing that would suggest that I should change that upwards or downwards at this time.
Okay. So the revenue sources that we have that was sent to us today, dated 5/19/20, totals $60,682,285, which corresponds with the expenditure plan put forward by the town manager.
That's correct.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is turn it over to Michael to give a presentation on the expense side. If anybody has a burning question, certainly interrupt them and ask it. However, I'd like to try to get everyone to just save their questions to the end, because there could be a lot of questions, and we certainly want everybody to ask their questions. But the plan tonight is, hopefully we hear the presentation. It's up to the finance committee whether you want to have another meeting by yourselves or another joint meeting to vote on this. It's going to be on our agenda a week from tonight to send to advertising, and we're scheduled right now to have a public hearing June 23rd. We have a 3-week break between June 2nd and our second June meeting, which is June 23rd. We have a 3-week break. So The plan right now is for us to vote the budget June 23rd. So next week, we would send it to advertising and then hold the hearing on June 23rd. So there's no urgency that you approve tonight or vote tonight. You can have another joint meeting, or the finance committee can certainly meet by themselves to discuss it. But tonight we'll hear the spending plan. We've pretty much heard a lot of the revenue sources and so forth. So I'll turn it over to Michael.
Thanks, Dennis. One of the things maybe I'll just quickly hit on is obviously this whole last 3 months has radically changed how we are looking at the budget and our budget objectives. Certainly as was the case for a couple of years, where our original budget objectives were to support, especially on the expense side, were to support and promote economic activity, fund current services in a sustainable way, incrementally increase funding in areas where there's sizable service gaps, preserve and improve the town's infrastructure, and then also meet our reserve objectives of 1.25% of the FY20 operating budget, which came down a little bit from 1.75. So those were our original objectives. That's the way we went into the budget and anticipated proceeding with the budget until the world changed. Now, really, our overriding objectives are to maintain current staff levels. Within that, we're going to reassign staff to different areas that need addressing from different areas that don't need as much manpower, people power. We are funding only the necessary municipal functions. We're going to refocus on economic rebuilding and preserving the town's infrastructure. And we are going to limit, to the extent possible, our reliance on the stabilization fund moving forward. So those are really the overriding objectives. On the expense side, I can tell you, Tony and his team have worked really hard with the departments to try to control or in many cases eliminate spending. Most of our budget, I think somewhere in the neighborhood of 85% to 90% of our budget is essentially people. So to the extent that we were able to cut back on non-people expenditures, to some extent it was a little bit of nipping around the edges. As I've mentioned to people, there are only 15 towns that spend less per capita than we do in the state, which is neither good nor bad. It's just a fact. But the ancillary effect is that we work with a very slim staff, and we expect a lot of the people that we pay. So there's really not, our objective obviously is to retain staff. We've made that commitment over many collective bargaining cycles. And as Tony pointed out, that's exactly what that stabilization account is for, is to get us through difficult times with limited impact to taxpayer services. So another thing, and maybe I'll just give you some of the highlights. So we, as I mentioned, we're funding. We're in the final, in most of our collective bargaining agreements. We're in the last year. FY21 will be the last year, and we'll be going into negotiations in probably January, February of 2021. So in some ways, we've used this budget to try to position us for those negotiations coming up the beginning of next year. That said, in terms of general fund, we haven't made very many really no significant changes to any of the general government functions. So it's pretty much status quo, and we realize that that's necessary. I did mention that we had some positions that we were looking to fill this year. We've come up with some good funding mechanisms, and I'm afraid that we're going to have to back off and wait at least a year in order to fill some of those, but I'll get to those. Education is obviously a big chunk. It's about 50% of our budget, a little more than 50% of our budget. So over the course of the fall, I know several of the counselors and Tony met with the district and a number of the school folks and school committee members. And I think I know you did one session on expenses, one session on revenues, where town revenues come from, and then I think you did a session on capital. All in an effort to try to share information, but also to try to sort of educate. I mean, if nothing else, we've tried to educate everybody, including staff and committee members, about where the money comes from and how it gets expended, and how it's limited by law and by practice. So during those meetings, at the time, Tony was working with a 2.9% revenue increase. We committed to that number back in October, November, and so that is the number that we are carrying through for the district assessment, is a 2.9% increase over FY20's base. That's about a little shy of $840,000 increase. We meet weekly with the superintendent and Kathy and Rainham folks to try to just share information and try to judge where we are in our respective budgets. The district has a really tough time because a lot of their budget, a substantial percentage of their budget, comes from Chapter 70 funds, essentially state aid. We rely on a little shy of $4 million in state aid. We know that's going to get cut. Tony's been using a 10% reduction for our purposes. But if the district sees a 10% reduction in its Chapter 70 funding, that's going to be a far more impactful cut than our 2.9% increase in the assessment. So we talk about that quite a bit, and the school is the district and superintendent obviously looking for some indications from the Department of Ed or the legislature about where they're going to go with their budget. So that's up in the air. But for our purposes, for right now, we're funding an increase of about $836,000, which is a 2.9% increase, which maintains that commitment that we tried to hold on to. That's the district. We also have slight decrease in the Norfolk Ag School. That just means that one student has graduated and was not replaced by another student from the district. We're seeing, excuse me, we're seeing a very substantial increase in the Bristol Plymouth assessment, and that's completely driven by student count. So there's about a 19% increase there, or about 291,000 increase in that Bristol Plymouth assessment. We have again, these are just highlights, and then we can dig into the specifics a little bit more. The highway or the roadways department, we have consistently added staff since 2013. And I made a point back in 2013 to say that, we're not going to, put 10 additional people there, even if we could afford it, because we know that long-term that's not a sustainable approach. So over the years, we've gone from what I think were 3 people and increased that gradually to the point we are now. but we may have to put the brakes on one of the open positions down there for 2020, rather for 2021. It was a position that was budgeted, but not filled. Excuse me. We also have seen an increase, obviously, in retirement, our retirement assessment, which was anticipated. We've seen a very slight increase in our health insurance, which is helpful. Workers' comp, we've seen an increase. We've had a fair number of comp claims, which tends to drive that number up. And that, so we've seen overall about a 6% increase in our employee benefits. So let me just, if you want, I don't want to hijack the meeting, but if anybody has sort of any questions on sort of the broad strokes, I'm happy to answer those before I dig into some of the detail.
Are you going to do more detail on the school request?
Yeah, I'll get to that. The school is just like everything is a bit of a challenge. And keep in mind, you know, Tony's efforts to really keep his fingers on the pulse of you know, the revenue on the revenue side has been very helpful. But as helpful as that's been, we really have, you know, I told somebody the other day, it was like budgeting with quicksand. We don't know what we have to spend, so it's very hard, or we don't know what we have to spend, so it's very difficult to decide how to spend it. So what we've presented is our best guess, and as we've talked about, and I think you guys have talked about quite extensively, you know, this is the year where we're going to presumably pass a budget before the beginning of July, but we'll be looking at this budget every week, and if we don't see revenues coming in where we need revenues, then we're going to be forced into making cuts. The flip side is if we see revenues coming in unexpectedly or greater than expected, then certainly you know, we'll have holes to fill in the expense budget, and we may look to transfer monies back in to support some of those expenditures. So it's a budget. It's going to be our roadmap, but we may be changing the way we get to the end of the fiscal year as we go along, and that's not something that traditionally we do. Traditionally, we set the budget, begins July 1st and then ends June 30th, and we make very few changes to it other than end of year transfers. So this year could be substantially different, and I don't only say that as sort of a heads up. But let me race through the you know, some of the departments here. Town council, we're maintaining, obviously that's one of our smallest departments, but we're maintaining staff and the way that department functions. No significant changes there. Town manager's budget, same thing. We're retaining the staff and no significant changes to the budget. We all, I think, are very well aware that each of us is going to be stepping up to focus on you know, the additional needs at hand, but otherwise no changes to our work program. Finance committee, same thing. Role is not changing. The function's not changing. We'll maintain current staffing levels and so forth. Reserve fund, same thing. No changes there. The reserve fund, obviously, next year, you know, may be a little more. We rarely talk about the reserve fund because thankfully we haven't needed it too often, but next year may be something different. So we have reduced the finance department budget by one of the unfilled positions, the salary for one of the unfilled positions. And obviously that, again, we know we're painfully aware that that's going to put an additional burden on certainly Tony and the others in those areas. But that was an area where we could free up some money. Legal department, Jason is our legal department, so there's no substantial change there at all. And I can tell you, just as an aside, you know, we get a substantial bargain there. Most towns our size expend a couple $100,000 in their legal line items. Information technology. We did hire Justin, was a mid-year hire, so the budget only reflects his continued employment, and obviously they're not getting any extra help, but they are going to become incredibly important as we move forward. I know there was a meeting today to talk about redesign of the website, certainly with an eye towards making it much more functional, and certainly their support of all the technology needs for all the employees that are dispersed and living, you know, living and working at home. So there's been a lot of increased work on their part, but again, they understand their role and have been going at it. So no significant change in the function or the role, but substantial increase in the amount of work that they have to do. Town clerk's budget, same thing. Reflects no change in the role or function of the department. Parking, we carry a parking department, which is funded with, I believe, about $15,000, which really offsets the overtime mostly for the parking patrols at the beginning of the school year and the beginning of the semester in the January. So that's no change there. Community and economic development, again, that's inclusive of planning, zoning, conservation, and no change in the role or function there. Simply the same people. Town buildings. We are, again, as I mentioned, temporarily defunding the facilities director and the building maintenance position. However, we will we'll shift some of that money into contract line items so that we can continue to pay for the services that we call upon. So, and we'll continue the stipend for as a stopgap measure until we get back to the point where we can recruit and advertise for that position. Police, no significant change in the role or function of that department either. Fire, the same thing. I mean, everybody is well aware of the work that they are doing right now and the heightened role that plays, but no significant change in the overall role or the function of that department. Same with inspectional services. Same with animal control. So the school, I think the school is the next in the budget. So the school assessment I talked about, but I think Kathy had a question about the school specifically.
I had a few, I guess just some more observations, I guess so the last thing we saw was an April 15th memo from, I think it was from the superintendent or the district treasurer to Mr. Dutton and Mrs. Salmonte, and they were requesting an amount of, excluding the capital, 29,854,656. And so has that number changed since April, or is that still their request?
So I guess the best way to answer that is technically, no, it hasn't changed. The school is obligated to send us an assessment letter, and they are under deadlines according to state law within which to send that information. so that's what makes our Wednesday calls with the superintendent and Rainham, all that much more productive. They know that that's, so let's see, how can I best put this? So Tony, if I stray off, you can rescue me.
Okay.
If,
I will.
so the school budget is made up of a number of different revenue sources. So our assessment is only one piece of that revenue assessment, or that revenue source. So you have Chapter 70, you've got some Medicaid reimbursement. You've got, a whole host of different, areas where these pieces that fund the district. So the biggest share of that, other than the collective assessments, the biggest share is Chapter 70. So Chapter 70, the fact that the school, Derek and Kathy, don't have any idea, what that assessment is going to end up being, really throws their entire budget into the same chaos that we have. We have no idea what our local aid is going to be. We're actually in a little bit better position because we know, real estate tax is the most secure revenue that you can get. And for most cities and towns in Massachusetts, real estate tax is their primary revenue. So unlike that, the school district relies, very heavily on Chapter 70, and Chapter 70, could fluctuate substantially, same as our local aid could fluctuate very substantially. So they really don't know. So the school budget subcommittee, has been meeting very regularly, and Derek sharing the information that he gets from both sides of the district, Rainham and
Catherine, be quiet, please.
so that's so I guess the best answer is technically yes, that technically is still a number. Nobody, including the school district, expects that number to be the actual number that gets to be the assessment.
Michael,
Yeah, I guess my concern is, so I went to the meeting I went to a couple of their meetings where they were talking about budget, and I went to their where they presented it to the town people who could come in, so their open meeting, and they presented that number, the total budget as that number. So if I calculated correctly, we're about $370,000 short on our assessment, which means Rainham's assessment would be lower by some amount as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's say that's 500,000 altogether. So they, are they talking about what that means and what they would have to cut? Are they, like, what does that, if we receive any of the federal or CARES funding money, would that be something that we'd be willing to give them more money, or does that just go to offset our stabilization fund that we're using now?
So
I guess I'm just, I haven't heard, like last year we were hearing at this point, I think, and I know it's a whole different ballgame, but we were hearing like, well, if we don't get this amount, then this is what it means. But are we hearing that?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think it's a whole different ballgame this year. There's no, based on the conversations we've had, I don't think they've even begun to think about what they would have to do in the event that, Chapter 70 comes in at 10 or 15 or 20% below. Everybody, I guess the comforting thought is that everybody is in the same boat. It's not just the Bridgewater Rainham School District. Everybody in the state is in the same boat. But they do, just to touch on the CARES Act, so that the district can avail itself of CARES Act funding. Unlike the town is going through Plymouth County to get reimbursements through CARES Act. The Department of Ed handles school districts for the statewide. So they have talked about, and I know that they're in the process of doing this, putting together their COVID-related expenses to look at CARES funding. So that's separate and apart, and that That I don't know. Actually, I'm not sure if that was designed to offset the shortfall of 2020 or if they were looking more at 2021. I think they were looking more at 2021, if memory serves.
Mr. Gallagher?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Is Kathy, are you done? Are you all set now?
I can wait.
Yeah, then we'll go to Tim after you.
Okay, I guess I would love to understand that, because if there's a way, last year, I know we were working so hard to try to find them a little more money, and we ended up using that capital money that we had left over, and I think they sort of included that when they did the 2.9, so that accounts for a little bit of that. But the other question is, in the document that you sent us, it says that, we gave a 2.9 over fiscal year 2020 base, not the base plus the capital, which we talked about that last year. But so this will provide the district an increase of over 836,000. And then it says the district will also be benefiting from its proportionate share of our stabilization fund. But is that of 764,000-ish? Is that number included in the budget, or is that an addition?
I'll answer that, Michael. We would have a deficit. If we didn't use $1.6 million, then we would be in deficit.
But we're not saying that they're getting, saying that they're getting 836 plus 764. We're saying they're getting 836, but part of that is coming from, part of the increase is coming from the stabilization fund, right?
764 is coming from the stabilization fund, and
Okay, I just was confused if it was separate, additional, or it was part of it.
part of it.
Thank you.
Okay. Counselor Fitzgibbons. Counselor Fitzgibbons, you're on.
It would probably be good for me to unmute. A question for Mr. Salmonte, I think. And we need to talk in big round numbers here, Tony, okay? I don't want to get into the minutia.
Okay.
Bridgewater's assessment for FY20 from the regional school district was 28 million.
Based on their number or
What we paid, what we agreed to, what we paid in the budget.
We have 29,485,055 this year.
Okay, let's talk big numbers. 29 million. Okay.
29 million.
Rainham is somewhere around 18-ish, is what they send over roughly. Somewhere between 15 and 20. Let's call it that. Okay. Can we be that round? Okay. And so that's approximately 45 million, right? In that ballpark. The school district's budget is 75 million, something like that. So the other 35-ish, 30-ish comes from the state, correct? Chapter 70, ignoring all the little things, ins and outs.
Yeah.
I'm talking about big numbers. I want to be within a million or two. Because what will happen if what happens, you're assuming a 10% decrease in our state aid, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so if the school district, if Chapter 70 experiences a 10% cut, that's $3 million, of which just under 2 million would then be reallocated as an assessment to Bridgewater, and just over $1 million would be allocated as an assessment to Rainham to meet their budget. That's how the regional school district budget works, correct?
That's correct.
So whatever we're doing on the edges, the regional school district, in my mind, is held captive by 70, and we need to put all of the pressure we can, this is just my opinion now, that we can on our state representative, our state senator, et cetera, to say, fully fund Chapter 70, fully fund transportation, which of course you've never done in a regional school district transportation budget, but please fully fund it. And those are the places we need to go, because if we're talking about moving around 100 or 200,000 on the edges, that's not going to be the core issue for the school district. The core issue for the school district is going to be what happens at the state level with what they get from 70 and 71. Does that make sense?
It certainly is the, that's really the big issue.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And I think, and again, though, I would only reemphasize that everybody's in the same boat. So there's no town, you know, with a $60 million budget that's going to be able to come up with another $2 million, you know, to fund its school district in the event that Chapter 70 gets cut, you know, to that extent. So it's a statewide problem. It's a nationwide problem, and we don't have enough information to really try to tell you where that's going to end up.
Michael, in the school budget totally, how much, like, we're using free cash to balance our budget. So is the schools using part of their E&D fund towards this budget? And do you know how much about, or?
We've no, it's a good question. We've used stabilization, you know, to fund our budget, which, you know, originates as free cash, but that's
Right.
that's semantics. The district has one right on my head.
E&D?
E&D.
E&D, yeah.
And Tony, correct me if I'm wrong. I think they had an E&D of $1.2 million, and they were looking to originally they were going to offset the budget with $800,000.
Yeah,
they were now
actually,
talking.
yeah, their E&G came in late October at $1,930,000. It was certified by the DOR. They're showing right now, if I got the right presentation, they were using, on March 11th, their presentation was using $800,000 from E&D.
Right.
Dennis, could I add something, please?
Sure.
I attended virtually the school committee meeting last week, and they were talking about pre-funding certain expenses for next year because they knew they had the money this year. So that may significantly impact what's available for E&D. It's almost the same thing because they're using the money to pay now instead of paying in the next fiscal year. But the E&D may be lower than, you know, perhaps one might believe because things are already paid up front just to make sure that they got paid and are getting done. So I just wanted to offer that as an observation.
Right. I really wish, though, we had some direction from the state as to what they might do. And this is really making it difficult for the municipalities. I know it's late May, but, you know, I don't even hear Beacon Hill talking about the budget or it's being done behind closed doors. But I really wish we had some better direction. But on that note, if we're going to use free stabilization money to balance our budget, I would assume that whatever CARES Act money we get reimbursed for will go right back into our reserves, as long as our budget is balanced. At the same level, if state aid is cut and Chapter 70 gets cut, and the regional school district does get some CARES Act money through their expenses that they've incurred because of this, I would hope that they would use that to offset any additional assessment they would send to the towns. But that's just my take on that. If they lose $3 million, but they get $1.5 million in the CARES Act, I don't know how we would be able to come up with $1 million and Rainham 500,000, but would hope that they would apply that and alleviate any additional assessment they may seek from the communities. But that's just my take on that. Anything else about the schools? We still got to go through. Where are we now? We're on the.
We're almost done.
Town engineer. Yeah.
One question. Bob Reese here.
Yeah, Bob.
What are our state rep and senators saying about what you just we're talking about? Are you getting any kind of information from them?
I guess the short answer, Bob, Dennis, if you want me to handle that one, the short answer is don't expect the state to bail us out. Is the very short answer.
Yeah.
So other than that, very little. I agree with Dennis. I haven't heard anything about anybody, talking about picking up the FY21 state budget and starting to work on it.
Okay. Well, that's not great.
No.
Uh-uh.
All right. So engineering, I mentioned roadways. We're going to shift money from one of the positions into contract tree work so that we can continue to provide the tree work while we get over this, hopefully 1 year of upheaval. Snow and ice. Thankfully, this year's deficit was about 225,000, which is not unmanageable. And otherwise, snow and ice, there's no change there. Same with street lighting, health department, elder services. Again, elder services, I think everybody knows, is really had to step up effectively. We've got 3 employees there, and no change currently no change in their function. But honestly, we're talking every week about what elder services is going to look like. Same with the library. We're talking every week about what the library is going to look like long term. So I think depending on how this fleshes out over the next 12 months, we'll have an idea of where those departments, how those departments are going to provide services and how the look may change. Veteran services, maintaining the status quo as well. I just mentioned the library, so maintaining status quo there as well, with the exception of budgeting to be open for 52, whatever open means, to be open 52 hours per week in FY21, which is up an additional 4 hours from 48 hours. That is required by the Board of Library Commissioners in order to maintain grant funding and certification. So we've proposed a budget that allows us to do that. Recreation, same thing. No substantial changes there. And debt service is debt service. Pretty much is what it is. Our state and county assessments are same thing. They've actually decreased by a nominal amount. And I had already mentioned employee benefits up 6%, largely due to retirement. I believe it was retirement assessment and workers' comp increases. Insurance rates were up about 13.5%. And gas and oil, status quo as well there. So there's really, it's a very unexciting budget, quite frankly, with the exception of the inclusion of over $1.5 million in offset from stabilization.
Bob, Reese, did you have a question? Your light keeps going yellow. No. No. Sean George?
No. No, I didn't. But now that you mention it, I'm an old guy. Give me a break. Way back when we and when I was on the advisory board and those kinds of things, if we needed some help, we could often get it from the assessors and lowering their assessment. Is that still something that can be done these days?
So that's, well, Tony's better positioned to answer that one than I am.
I'm comfortable where the number is. No, I'm not looking to lower the figure at this time.
Okay.
Sean,
All right.
George, you have questions?
Thank you. So this may be either to Michael or to Tony. So in reviewing the budget, and by the way, Herculean effort to get that done, I think I may have asked this a long time ago, but in going through the allocation of expenses, why is it that we don't allocate health insurance, benefits, things of that nature within each department versus just having it as one 7 million odd line item?
We could, it's just a budgetary practice, because that's where we control it. We control people coming on and going off at a global level. So for instance, the reason we do that, for instance, is if someone has a qualifying event, let's say in the police department, they have 5 qualifying events and 5 people no longer on the plan, and that frees up money. We have in one department someone that we didn't know was going to have a qualifying event, or some buddies that you didn't know, and end up having people added. So it's one of those numbers that we do globally, we budget globally so that we can adjust to that. But for cost purposes, if anyone ever wanted a slice of what does that budget cost and fully loaded cost of fringe benefits, it can be done. It's just a matter of time and effort.
Okay, I think not for this discussion, at some point, Tony, just down the road, that probably would be something that would be beneficial from a global perspective. Understanding allocation of costs makes it easier if you have it as a line item. But I think down the road, it'd be something that people would want to potentially take a look at, just to have a better picture of, the slice of the pie that we look at in regards to each department, to know, what percentage of the overall budget they represent. So thank you for the answer.
Okay, certainly.
Okay, Michael, I have a couple of questions on the, in your budget, Michael, you have increased the position of, you have an HR generalist, which I know we've talked about this position before, and I know it's budgeted right now at $11,000. I don't know if that's being used or if that's just part of the assistant town manager's salary. But in fiscal 21, you're looking to go to a part-time person, I believe, and you're increasing that to a $38,000 position. I'm not saying that position's not needed. I don't know if this is the right time to do that. And when there is the right time to do that, I think you might just go the whole horse and bring on a full-time person. But can you just explain the thought process behind that?
Yes. So just to be clear, we have recruited for an HR generalist, and we have found an exceptional person and hired that person. And I would defer to Tony because I'm not seeing. I'm trying to bring it up on my worksheet here. But exactly how the salary is spread.
Yeah, because that salary is being spread. What we Kimberly and I had talked about where those resources are going to be needed over and have been needed over the last year and into next year. And the recruitment for water and sewer positions has been become quite taxing. And if Kim wants to jump in, and as a result, the ability to fill those positions have been next to impossible. Now, the market has changed. We didn't know that, 2 months ago. So maybe a month from now, filling those vacant positions, we're going to be able to do it more easily. But that was one of the major drivers, is that the amount of time being spent in water and sewer. So in the water and sewer budget, you'll see an allocation for the other portion of those salaries.
So the person has been hired and they are on board now.
Correct.
Where are they housed? Where are they sitting? Or he or she? Oh, that's good answer. Good answer. All right. We'll let that go for now.
Actually, ironically, her first, just so kind of get a kick out of the story. Her first day on the job was the first day that we sent our staff home. So I reminded her several times that she'll never forget her first day of work.
Michael, tomorrow night, I'm going to be meeting, having the first meeting with the Charter Review Commission. I had talked about this with you briefly yesterday. And I want to bring it up now, but since Josh is here and he can listen. I was hoping to see a couple of $1,000s put aside for secretarial support, taking minutes and stuff for the Charter Review meetings that they're going to have, which we had 4 years ago. You had told me that that may be something that could be absorbed within the Finance Committee budget or somehow like that, and that Josh could be that person helping out the Charter Review Committee, right?
Correct. If Josh, I haven't talked to Josh about
Josh,
this,
did you hear that now?
Yeah, I heard it.
So when I meet with them tomorrow night, I can let them know, that this is a resource, as long, I know he's got meetings with the Budget and Finance and other meetings, it'll have to coordinate his availability with the Charter Review Committee.
Right. But we will make that work.
Okay. The CARES Act, in the FY21 budget, Michael, adjustments and changes that you have had to make in this budget that relate to COVID-19 and what we could expect from July 1st on. Is there some sort of calculation or number you have in this budget that is COVID-19 related that you might seek CARES Act money for this, notwithstanding what we've incurred up to date now and through what we will incur up until June 30th?
I'm gonna cut Mr. Dutton off.
Okay.
And the answer for him, no, there's nothing.
So there's nothing in the FY21 budget
That is correct.
that we could put in, but there could be incidents that occur within
That's
the
correct.
year. that
We're
would have-
planning on it. We are absolutely planning on that.
Okay,
Yes.
so we're pretty much, not accommodated, we're pretty much, operating, using our operational budget as presented or as approved to cover any COVID-19 related expenses.
Well, two things. If there are additional expenses that we have to incur, we're planning on that, and we'll be using COVID or CARE Act money for it. The
Okay.
other component is if our resources are allocated towards a CARE function or COVID function and not allocated according to the standard operation, we would then be looking for reimbursement there. But both cases, we don't know yet, so we will adapt as required.
Okay, that's the only questions I have in the budget tonight. Anybody else have any questions about the budget expenses?
Just real quick, Dennis, Tony, can you remind the stabilization fund balance?
We're just under $6 million. Michael, I think, has the latest printout, but that changes every month with interest that's posted.
Roughly 6
Oh,
million.
yeah, 6 million says, yeah.
Thank you.
Are the savings that we've talked about for the street lighting project, are those included in the budget?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mike. No, go ahead, Michael.
I was going to say we have not included those because the project has not been done yet. So we're in the process of doing that. So that's a number that we can look at as soon as that project closes out.
When do we anticipate that to being done?
I believe they have till the end of July to complete it.
Any other questions on order FY21-001? We got 6 more. We got 6 more budget orders. You want to move on to the water and sewer enterprise budgets?
Sure. Let me just pull.
Or that's already built in?
So So I can basically tell you there's no substantial change. We do have positions that are open. Those are positions that we cannot drop from these budgets. Obviously, water and sewer, different technical requirements, licensing requirements, so we can't just simply not fill some of those positions. So we have to keep those positions funded. Let me just bring that.
Transfer station. Kathy, did you have a question? Your light was yellow. I see.
I didn't touch
yellow light.
anything.
Okay. I can't see hands, but if I see the yellow, you know, like Hollywood Squares light go on, I think you might have a question.
Oh, I was just turning my pages, sorry. You can mute me if you want.
No, I don't think I can.
You risk never coming back.
Trust me, if Dennis could mute people, he would.
I'm sorry.
Transfer station.
Pulling up the, just pulling it up, sorry. Again, no change in the function of the transfer station. This is a challenge, you know, and I think I've spoken with Councilor Fitzgibbons about this during a council meeting. The transfer station, the waste and recyclables is such a dynamic market that you don't really think about. You don't really, you don't think about it really at all. But it is. So the transfer station has, 6 years ago, they were making money, quite a handsome amount of money on their recyclables. Now they actually have to pay to truck the recyclables out. So that's how dramatically that's changed. So you can't, instead of using recyclables as a source of revenue, now you're in a position where you've got a budget for their removal. So we funded, the total, done a projection. It's a $346,000 operation. We're looking at raising that same amount of money. We have increased fees, and we've done some preliminary work to market the transfer station more. But that is no change, essentially no change in their overall function.
What would we consider increasing again? Or, I think we're less expensive than neighboring towns.
We are, and that's part of a strategy to use as marketing. So we have no qualms, having out of town trash come in to offset the loss of the recyclable loss, increase the volume so that we can increase our revenue to offset the loss of the revenue from recyclables. So that is something that we're looking at, but quite honestly, you could have a very philosophical conversation about the transfer station. I mean, it's a place that's available to all taxpayers. So that to the extent, and this isn't the way we want to run it, but to the extent that you have to offset a deficit at the end of the year with a transfer, it's a little bit different than offsetting the golf course with an end of year transfer, because the golf course, it's harder to argue that the golf course is there for the benefit of all the taxpayers, but certainly that the transfer station is there for the benefit of all the taxpayers. So,
Mr. Gallagher.
Yeah.
When Mr. Dutton's done.
Well, I was just going to say, we don't want to run a deficit in either, but if you run a small deficit in the transfer station, covering it with the money from all the taxpayers is not wildly inappropriate. Obviously better to cover it with increase, to the extent that you can sustain it, and it works with an increase in your tipping fees.
Tim?
Yeah, I actually couldn't disagree more with what Mr. Dutton just said, and it may take me a couple seconds to unpack this, so just bear with me. I'll try to be as brief as possible. First of all, Mr. Dutton, does the recreation department exist for the benefit of all the taxpayers in Bridgewater? If so, then how come it's being funded essentially on a double tax to all the parents who have kids in the recreation program and never runs a deficit because they pay their money? Second of all, we're opening the transfer station to people from out of town. Are they paying their yearly fee for their sticker? I want to know that. Third of all, if we're going to do something, I'd rather raise sticker prices if we're going to do that rather than dumping fees. And I'll save other comments for later, but those are just my first ones. Thank you.
So I guess your first one is a point well taken. The second one, yes, to the extent that we allow anybody in, it's on a sticker basis. I apologize. What was the third one?
I think people
I'd rather
don't think
raise
they need to
sticker
have stickers
prices.
for recycle.
Oh, yeah.
I think they let you in without a sticker for recycle, and if we're paying to recycle, then we should be making sure that all those people have stickers.
It's so let me say this. We know the transfer station needs a lot of our attention, and it will get a fair amount of our attention over the course of between now and the end of next year. But I think as we've discussed internally, we're looking at addressing these things in order of their magnitude and their overall impact. So that transfer station will fall into that list of items to have to look at, but it's not the primary thing that we have to look at right now, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the transfer station is a good asset, and it's a great service that is provided to the town. I mean, I use it and I pay for my sticker and I pay for my trash. That it's cyclical. It's a cycle that the recyclables the price goes up and the price comes down. It's just the market, what it bears. Maybe adjustments need to be made, but I would think that lately their revenue was probably, I would think that their revenue recently might have peaked a little bit because everybody's home trying to throw everything away. I don't know. I mean, I see on social media a lot about people talking about how much they're paying for private pickup. And I don't really get involved in the conversations, but I do like it when somebody posts, hey, use the transfer station, because that's your best bang for your buck. I do think it is. But yeah, I think if it's consistent that they can't cover their expenses, then something needs to be looked at. I agree. Anything else on the transfer station? Now let's golf.
So no, for this budget cycle, we're not anticipating any change again to the function of the course. But as it's presented, it anticipates a quote unquote normal year of golf as best as we can figure. So as you know, the golf course reopened after being ordered shut down. They reopened with drastically different protocols in place. Their numbers, I talked to Charlie the other day, their numbers before the long weekend, but their numbers look good in terms of the number of people they've been able to put on the course. So we're going, I think as is appropriate with the numbers that are there, with very little change other than contractual obligations.
Councilor George, did you have a question?
I do. So Mr. Dutton, question. I don't know if this works the same way, but since the golf course was mandated to shut down by the governor, does the golf course have any opportunity to recoup those lost wages or those lost revenues under the CARES Act?
So under the CARES Act, you cannot recoup lost revenue, but what you can do is submit a claim for the cost of maintaining the continuity of the operation and the staff necessary so that when COVID-related shutdowns were lifted, that you are ready to get up and running. So Michael and I talked about that today. We will be submitting to offset some of the deficit we would anticipate for this coming fiscal year with a COVID claim.
Okay, so what I would assume, and I'm going to oversimplify a complex thing, that the maintenance cost to keep the, to keep the everything going. So weeding, feeding, all of that, there'll be something that we'll be able to submit for reimbursement.
That is correct.
All right, thank you.
When do we anticipate money's actually coming in from the CARES Act?
We'll be submitting our first request for reimbursement. The way this is going to work is we're going to submit to FEMA for those FEMA-related costs. We'll get 75% of that reimbursable. That deficit will be moved to a special revenue fund. We won't get those FEMA funds probably for 6 months at best. 25% of it that they will not pay through FEMA funds will get reimbursed through CARES. And June 12th is when we're going to submit the CARES so that we in fact get a reimbursement before the end of the fiscal year to offset any deficits that we have.
The end of this fiscal year?
That's correct. And it's an ongoing submittal. It's not a one and done.
Yeah.
So if I could ask a follow-up on that, have we gotten any indication from Plymouth County in regards to what their timeline is going to be about the funds that they're sitting on? And are we going to be able to recoup some of this before the end of June if we have to go through that?
Yes, they're all set. Michael asked me to sit on a couple of meetings, and the paperwork is all out there. They got a website out there, and there's 1 or 2 communities that are already submitted for reimbursement. They've allocated 25% of the 90 million to the cities and towns that are under Plymouth County. I think that represents about 23 million, if my math is correct. And Bridgewater was allocated 1.2 million.
Thank you.
So that, is that 1.2 million, will that come in like when we look at free cash, or will that, how will we see that?
That's all reimbursable. It's going to be in a special revenue fund. So we'll have expenses, we'll ask for reimbursement, we'll get reimbursed. If it has to do with the golf course enterprise fund, we'll ask for reimbursement. It will go into that particular special revenue fund. And when it does, we'll reallocate the costs associated with the COVID expense from the enterprise fund into that special revenue. So bottom line, the benefit goes to the golf course under that scenario, and any costs that we've incurred for fire, police. Right now, we're keeping track of that in another special account. But again, all the accounting will be done based on the federal guidelines.
I guess if I can ask it in a simpler way, maybe.
It doesn't go. It will never go into free cash. Ever.
But when a couple weeks ago when we met and you showed us sort of the projected free cash.
Yep.
Right, would that number potentially be increased because we have that other revenue coming back in, or
no,
was that already accounted for because the expenses were separate as well?
I don't know if I made an adjustment for that allowable deficit. I'd have to go back and check, Kathy. At this point in time, you are correct. If we have a deficit like you do for snow and ice, or you have a deficit for the COVID, it's allowable deficit. So in essence, it hits your fund balance, but it doesn't offset your free cash. I don't want to get too technical.
Yeah.
We're going to move it out of the general fund. Just know we're going to move the expense out of the general fund. So we won't show a deficit in that budgeted line item for any COVID-related expenses. bottom line, it's not going to negatively impact the free cash. And in fact, if I had that factored in, free cash would go up. And I can't,
That's what I was hoping. It would go up, not down.
it's not going to go down.
Right.
Any other questions on the golf course? And we'll move on to the revolving funds.
The revolving funds are pretty straightforward, just same as the year before.
The CPA reserve accounts.
CPA reserve accounts, it's very simple. The only obligation that the CPC has right now is the annual debt, its portion of the annual debt for the Academy building. That's $366,600. Otherwise, all the budget is really doing is appropriating administrative expense, then the three buckets for the open space, historic, and housing. So pretty straightforward.
Any questions on that? I don't know what the wishes are. We do not have to have a recommendation for next week's meeting. You can still go to advertising and post the hearing. We need to have a recommendation to the council by June 23rd to have the hearing. So I don't know what the pleasure is of the finance committee, whether you guys want to continue to deliberate by yourselves or have another joint meeting, or ready to vote tonight. And I'll ask my two colleagues the same thing.
Mr. Gallagher.
Yes.
Just procedurally, and this may have to go to Mr. Dutton. If we advertise the budget as it's presented here before the Finance Committee and before the Budget and Finance Committee weigh in, and then for some reason between the advertisement and the meeting we're going to have at the end of June, we change things, we can only lower revenue as a council. We can't increase it. We can allocate expenses however we want, but do we have to re-advertise is the question.
I believe the answer would be no, because what you're doing is you're advertising my proposed spending plan, and as you point out, you have every right to change that as long as the expenses do not increase, but you have every right to move money around. And I don't believe it requires re-advertising, but I can double check with Jason on that.
That's what I thought too. I just wanted to double check and make sure, because we're going to have a hearing at the end of June, and whatever happens at the end of that hearing, hopefully.
Right, because the public hearing could, obviously, some of the comments from the public may make us want to move something around too, so.
Yeah, I don't think this is like a zoning
Right.
where it's a question of, less impactful, more impactful. I think this is it's one-time advertising, and then council certainly can decide to move items around or lower the budget, but doesn't require another advertisement.
So I guess, and this will be my final comment, Dennis, I guess from my perspective, I'd rather take a couple more weeks and learn as much more new information as I can before I'm ready to pull a trigger and vote to recommend or not. Finance Committee can obviously do as they want, but that's where I'm sitting right now.
Right, and we got a very the details today. So, I mean, it's pretty much laid out in very particular detail, which I think we'll probably see at the public hearing anyway. So I would ask at least Sean and Councilor George and Councilor Gibbons to, we'll take a look at that and come back and have another meeting, maybe have a joint meeting, or I don't know, should we?
I'm up for whatever. I'd like to hear from the Finance Committee on their thoughts, what they want to do.
Right.
So Tim and Dennis, and I'll open it up to the rest of the group after, but I completely agree with your thought process, Tim, on taking a couple more weeks and getting the best information that we can. having one more joint meeting if that works for everybody, and if the rest of the finance committee is in agreement, that would be my recommendation as well.
So I'm looking at June 9th, June 8th or 9th.
What day of the week is that, Dennis?
I'm sticking with Tuesday, June 9th or June 8th. Unless the school committee, unless the school building committee has been meeting Mondays. That's why I was trying to stay
Yeah.
with. Yeah.
Perfect.
So
The
we'll,
9th works for me. Does anybody have an issue with that?
It works for me.
Good for me.
Excellent.
so we'll have our next joint meeting on June 9th.
What time do you want to shoot for?
6:30, 7, or
Absolutely. That's fine.
we'll do 7 o'clock, right?
Sounds good.
Any public comment tonight? Anybody out there from the public want to comment? I see a couple people, but I don't see hands.
Dennis, it's Mike Dolan.
Hi, Mike. How you doing? Go ahead.
Good, thank you. I just wanted to take a minute and thank everybody for their work on the budget. On behalf of the school committee and as a taxpayer in town, I know how much work goes into creating a budget for in these times. So I just wanted to thank everybody, thank Michael and Tony specifically for working with the district, and Derek and Kathy. They, like Michael said, they've been meeting every week and doing some really heavy lifting. So appreciate it.
Anybody else? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the Budget and Finance Committee meeting.
So moved.
Second.
And any discussion, all those in favor, it's Counselor George,
Yes.
Counselor Fitzgibbons,
Yes.
Counselor Gallagher, yes. We are now adjourned at 8:18.
I will entertain a motion to adjourn the FinCom meeting for May 26th.
So moved. Julie.
Motion,
Eric?
second. Nathan?
Aye, Josh.
Nathan?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
Kathy?
Bye.
Leah?
Aye.
That adjourns the meeting.
Night.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Good night. Thank you, everybody.
Everybody.
Good night.
Night.